Hi, for those of you who don't know me or haven't met me, I'm Dr. Elkins. I'm the chiropractor here at Lazarus Chiropractic and Hands for Life. I'd like to welcome you to our orientation. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do here, why we do things here, and hopefully inspire some questions within yourself that you can write down or ask later. Before I get started, I just want to let you know that everybody goes through this process, and it's done this way because if you've ever been to any other chiropractors, you're going to know that we tend to all do things differently. And I want you to know how we do things here, what our expectations are, and make sure that you're absolutely comfortable with this environment. A little bit about chiropractic. I went to Palmer. Palmer is considered the Harvard of chiropractic, and it's where it all began, actually. Believe it or not, chiropractic didn't start with headaches, neck, and back pain. It started with a man named Harvey Lillard who hurt himself at work, had a lump pop out on his neck, and actually became instantly deaf. And 17 years he looked for help. When eventually, September 18th, 1895, he ran into a man named Dr. D.D. Palmer. And in Davenport, Iowa, after having a consultation about what had happened, Dr. Palmer laid his hands on the lump on his neck, and with a very short, specific, adjustive thrust that changed the world as we know it in beginning chiropractic, Harvey Lillard then stood up and could hear. And that is amazing. So people began to come from all over the world seeking chiropractic care, and people came from all over the world wanting to know how to become chiropractors. One of the things I like to do just to get you started is to try to help clear up any confusions. And that's kind of what we hope to do with this as well. You probably can relate to this idea that when people have some type of illness, disease, sickness, or injury, and the moment other people around them find out that they've got it, you begin to have all this input about where you should go, where you shouldn't go, who you should see, who you shouldn't, what you should take, what you shouldn't take, this, and before long, you get this picture. You get all these options, which leads to confusion, and you don't know what to do next. We want to make the pathway clear for you. We want to make the decisions and choices easy for you. When you look at this picture, what does it make you think or feel? And don't just say, oh, it's a watch. I want you to really invest your thoughts into this. What does it make you think or feel? Most people, over the years of me showing this image, always say complicated. In addition to that, people often say, well, you know, there are a lot of parts moving there. And I want you to think about the detail and intricacy of all these parts working together. If one became damaged or malfunctions, how does it affect the overall outcome and production of the watch? I think we can all agree that somehow it's going to affect it, right? If not completely stop its function. Well, your body is just as amazing and even more complicated than what you see here. You have literally trillions of cells, and it's estimated around 70 trillion parts or cells that make you uniquely you. All those little parts form larger parts that eventually form into organs, which eventually form into systems, which eventually form into you. And if all those parts aren't doing their job properly, eventually when enough of them fail, it leads to a dysfunction which you might uniquely identify as sickness, disease, or symptoms. So we have this miraculous functioning body that we want to talk about that has all this complexity. And if we were to ask you to work on that watch, well, some people would just say, absolutely not. It's too much. I don't know how to do that. And when we take that to the next level of how complicated the body is and how everything has to work together, it gets even more so. And thankfully, we don't have to be a clock manufacturer or repairman when it comes to the body, because you were born with innate intelligence which lives within your body. And innate intelligence just simply means inborn intelligence. Now, we're not talking about the intelligence that gives you 2 + 2. We're talking about the intelligence within the human body that makes your heart beat, your lungs breathe, your stomach digest food, all these different functions that you don't even have to think about, that are happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's intelligence. To know that you could cut your skin and you don't have to go to the doctor, that scratch will mend on its own because of the intelligence that's stored within your brain that dynamically coordinates, runs, controls your entire body. In fact, in science and physiology, they describe your nervous system as the master control system, meaning it controls every organ, cell, and tissue and function in your body. Now, for that intelligence within the brain to be able to reach and control and coordinate and organize all these different systems, it has to have a communication channel, right? How important is communication to you? What happens if communication breaks down? It's never good, right? So we have to have a communication line that connects between the brain and all these parts. And that's where your spine and nerve system come in. The nerves connect the brain to the cells. And every single one of the vertebrae in your spine have a nerve that comes out the left side and the right side. There's 24 movable bones within your spine, and there are all these nerve projections that come out that connect to different regions and organ systems. And they behave in a communication function much like fiber optics. In this picture, you're looking at an artist rendering of fiber optics. Now, when we look at a nerve in cadaver studies in chiropractic school or even in medical school, you see material that's laying here, matter, that has no life. And when you're looking at a nerve on a cadaver or even in an image, what I want you to understand is that we oftentimes don't think about what's moving through that object. And for you and for me as living human beings, we have life flowing through those nerves. We have intelligence flowing through those nerves. We have information, data, however you like to name it. It doesn't matter to me as long as you get the concept that there is something moving through those nerves and it's not blood. That information translates into an effect or an action on the other side as a command that is being produced. When we dissect a nerve and we cut it and put it under a microscope and magnify many times, here's what you see. And when you look at this nerve tissue, doesn't it remind you of the fiber optics? In fact, if we were to pull the edges back and fray it out like a brush-like object, like the fiber optics in the picture in the corner, then it would be much more relationship-wise, it would look more like the fiber optics, right? And that makes sense. But what I want you to see is this is a tiny nerve in some part of the human anatomy, and it has all these little bitty fibers within the nerve that are connecting your brain to that particular body region. And every single one of those little fibers is moving information back and forth from the brain to the body. Now here's something I want to take you on this little story to help you understand how nerves work and operate and function. Because when we talk about nerves, most people think that their primary function and job is for you to feel, right? If you were to count all the little nerve fibers in this picture, and we're going to keep it simple and say there were 100, okay? If there were 100, which there are far more than that, if there were 100 fibers there, most people, in other words, think that all 100 of those fibers' job is to make you feel. And neurologic research now shows that around 7% of those fibers, in other words, 7 out of 100 of those fibers, actually senses or feels. The other 93% have no feeling at all. All they're doing is communicating. Now what I want to talk to you about is the 3 major functions that your nervous system does for you. And the first is healing, self-healing. In other words, if I scratch my arm, I don't have to put a Band-Aid on it if I don't want to. I mean, ultimately, it's going to what? It's going to heal. Now, if I cut my arm off completely at a job accident, my body's not going to do that on its own. It needs help. But even when the doctor puts that back on and reattaches it to the best of their ability, they'll also tell you that now it's up to what? The body. So the body has to heal that. The nervous system is what controls and coordinates that. So all healing is controlled by the nervous system. Very important concept to understand. I had nurses that used to drive up from heart surgery frequently because all day they were in heart surgery doing this, right? And one of the things that they would tell me was that during heart surgery, frequently they would see where a patient literally had their own bypasses being grown around the heart artery blockage, right? So you have blockage, you have the body growing its own bypasses. In some cases, there literally were reports of 3 of the body's own bypasses growing around. And in some cases, by the way, those bypasses were fully functional and doing their job. Is that healing? On a whole different level, right? The next thing I want to talk to you about is nervous system control. Nervous system control in that you have 2 functional divisions of the nervous system. And to keep it simple, we're just going to call it the gas pedal and the brake. So in other words, if there are moments in your life where you need your blood pressure to speed up, whether it's an accident that's about to happen or someone's chasing you, you want your blood pressure to go up so that you have enough power and oxygen and blood within your muscles to move, right? You don't have to think about that. Thankfully, the brain sends a signal down the spinal cord through the sympathetics into the cardiac nerve, which causes the heart to speed up. That's the gas pedal. And at later times, we want our heart to slow down. We don't want to have high blood pressure all the time. We don't want to have a stroke, so we need our body to calm back down, especially when we go to sleep, right? So the brain sends another signal through the vagus nerve into the heart, which causes the counter effect. That's the brake pedal. Every organ in your body, every system in your body has a gas pedal control from the brain and a brake control. And really, that's what medicine is trying to duplicate with chemicals. If you have an organ system that's working too hot, too fast, they try to chemically subdue it and cause it to slow down. If you have an organ system that's not working enough, for instance, constipation, they try to chemically alter it by increasing its speed. And that's really the job of your nervous system. So, an important thing I want you to keep in mind, and it's not that we're trying to use chiropractic to manipulate your body or system to do one thing or the other, because ultimately the intelligence within your body knows exactly how fast or how slow a system should be operating based on your very current needs. We don't know that, but inside you, the intelligence within you, it's got that taken care of. All we need to do is make sure your nervous system has complete 100% connection. The third thing I want to talk about is adaptability. You know, probably one of the most important things that your nervous system does for you is its ability to adapt you to your constantly changing environments and the stressors within your environment. And there's three types of stressors: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. Thoughts are the things that we think in our mind and the stress that tends to accumulate. Traumas are the things that we've been through or currently go through. They may be just simply gravity. It may be poor posture at work, sitting too long. It may be texting, the trauma that happens from this stagnant posture. And then, of course, you have toxins, and the toxic effects come from everything around us: the environment, the food we eat, the things we put on our skin, the water we drink. And toxins are obviously becoming a very large reality for some of us this time of day. So our nervous system adapts us to its best ability to be able to survive these different stressors that are being accumulated in our lifestyle. So when you look at this tree, what do you see? You see an adult tree, a very large tree, that's not bending over because the wind's blowing right now. It has been blowing its whole life on this mountaintop, right? And so it had two choices: break and die, or adapt to the forces of the wind that are being applied to it its whole life, and thus survive, right? So this is a lot like posture. And posture, by the way, affects your spine drastically. So if you're sitting at a computer all day like this for 16 years of your life, when you stand up 16 years later, guess what? It has shaped you. Now, you don't see gravity, but that physical effect has absolutely had an impact on your posture, just like this tree. There are laws of physics all around us that are being applied to us on a daily basis that affect us. Whether we see them or not, whether we believe in them or not, they're there, right? So we wouldn't want to take this tree and suddenly shift it back up, right? If we could even physically do that, it would break. When we're changing your spine with time and repetition, eventually we make substantial slow changes if it hasn't created too much damage over too long a period of time. So, in the beginning, you've heard this big word that we use called subluxation. Now, I want you to take a second and pause and repeat after me. Subway station. That's right. Subway station. It rhymes with subluxation. You'll never forget that now. So what is subluxation? Well, there are two major definitions of that in the chiropractic world. One is from ancient writings that sub means less than, lux means light, and ation means the condition of. So in other words, there is a condition of less light. And now with all the technology we have today, we can see that when you have subluxation, there's an alteration of the infrared light that your body emits. There's also an alteration of the communication flow through the body that we can actually measure with technology. Another definition of subluxation, which gets more into the physical aspect, is when we have one bone that has slipped or misaligned out of position, causing pinching, rubbing, or damaging irritation and pressure to the nerves that come out of that particular vertebral segment. And when that happens, that causes, either way, whether you look at it from one definition to the other, an alteration of this communication flow from the brain through the nerves to the body and back. And when we have a disruption in communication, we have less than 100%, we have problems. So we want how much percentage of communication going from your brain to every organ, cell, and tissue in your body? 100. We want 100%. So my job as a chiropractor is to identify specifically where you have subluxation, how it is, and whether or not I need to do something to reduce it or improve it through the means of the specific chiropractic adjustment. So we utilize all the technology we have at our hands and in this office to identify exactly which parts of your spine are subluxated and therefore need a chiropractic adjustment. I get a lot of laughs when I show this particular image, and I want to explain why. The basic concept here is that this particular man screaming through the megaphone is pain at some part of your body, screaming up to the brain cells that we're hurting and we need help. And what I want you to understand here is that not all pain is bad. I'll give you an example. If I bend over and I tear a disc in my back because I'm shoveling, and it creates immediate inflammation which leads to pain, then you'd probably agree that I could go pretty much anywhere and find some kind of medication at varying strengths that would eliminate some of that pain, if not all of that pain associated with that. But here's the thing, the tear is still there. So just by eliminating the pain hasn't really resolved the issue for me. In fact, because the pain's gone, most people think if there's no pain, that must mean that that pill did what? Must have fixed me. And so I go right back out and shovel again with the tear still there. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's absolutely horrible, right? So we don't want to constantly cover up our symptoms. We want the symptoms to be real. They're there for a purpose, and that is to make you slow down and give your body time to heal. All healing requires time. And I know that that's not an answer a lot of people like to hear, because we want things when? We want them now. But we have to allow the healing process what it needs to do its job properly. Now, this picture was taken of one of my daughters, and I believe she had just literally gotten into a fight with one of her sisters. She literally took tape, covered her mouth, and she wrote this sign. It would be important for me to also say that she was in kindergarten at Briarwood here, which means I'm very proud of what she wrote there, because I couldn't have done that in kindergarten. So if you can read that in kindergarten language, it says, I can't say anything. So she began to parade around the house with tape on her mouth, and I was just so proud of her. The point to this is, when communication becomes injured or damaged in your nerve system, beyond the pain, beyond the injury, at some point it is a process, meaning it continues to develop, it continues to worsen. It doesn't just stop and sit there and not get worse. It's either getting worse or it's getting better. And in this case, it's getting worse, which leads to, if you're lucky enough, symptoms of tingling and numbness. And when you have tingling and numbness, I want to make certain you understand this means things are getting worse. This means that you've gone far down this road of injury, trauma, and problems than you probably want to go. Needless to say, we see a lot of people who come in with tingling and numbness in their arms, hands, legs, or feet, which is related to nerve damage. And so we have to get very serious. We have to get very focused. You have to get in the game. You have to take action steps now, not later, in order to get over this. Now, I like to ask a question here for my patients. Is it important for you that your chiropractor knows exactly which vertebrae need to be adjusted and which ones they just need to leave alone, right? So I'm going to tell a story about my wife, and hopefully she won't be too angry with me for telling you this. But at one time there was a problem with electrical outlet in our house, and every time the kids would be making their breakfast before going to school, when they'd put the microwave on and the toaster and maybe there was something else, it would throw a breaker, right? So everybody can relate to this box of breaker panels, this breaker panel with all the little breakers that we all have, right? So she goes out early in the morning and she forgets her glasses, so she can't see literally which breaker it is that's flipped. What does she do? All the way down the panel, right? And there's two of them, so she only did one side. But when she came back in, guess what? She hadn't fixed anything. So she looks at me and she says, will you please go out there and figure out which breaker it is, because I can't see. And I jump to it. I go out and I literally because I can see which breaker has flipped by the red indicator. I walk up and immediately, how soon? Immediately I can see the red breaker that has flipped. All I do is grab it, click, click. I go back in the house, and to the kids, what? I'm a hero. The point is, when it comes to subluxation, the technology with the x-rays, the nerve testing, and everything else that we have as our resources here make us able to see where the dysfunction is in your spine. That's important, because we don't just want to go up and down the spine like so many do, snapping and cracking and popping everything from your head to your big toe. Because a healthy joint doesn't need to be adjusted, doesn't need to be manipulated, more likely is what we would call it. An adjustment only happens where it needs to be done. So with our technology, as you can see, we can see exactly where the breakers have been flipped. Now, X-ray shows us how the bone is out of its position. So this guy's coming along and this car literally is blocking the entire pathway. What does he do? It's not parked in the spot that it was supposed to be, so he takes it upon himself to pick the car up and literally in the video moves it into the parking spot. X-rays show us bones, but our X-rays, specifically with the biomechanic software, shows us exactly how and where the bones are misaligned, so that by way of a specific chiropractic adjustment, we can move that bone back into its parking place where it's supposed to be. And that's really as simple as I can explain. That's why it's not just X-rays that are important, because we're not looking for fractures and tumors and things like that, like your family doctor is going to be looking at. We're looking at biometric analysis of your biomechanics. Now, this is Dr. Palmer, and Dr. Palmer, this probably was taken in the 1960s. See the jacket? Yeah, looks good, right? So Dr. Palmer, the son, BJ, took what his father created with chiropractic and evolved it. And he began this process of educating and developing what chiropractic was from his father's time to pretty much what we have it as today. He created procedures and technology that we still are able to use today to help get sick and injured people well. He didn't have the technology that we now have. And if he had, the world would be a different place today, I assure you. This is an MRI of the brain. We send people for these scans to a special facility in Louisville. We don't have one around here. So understand, the MRIs that you're being sent out for here do not look at these functions. They basically look at a blob on a stick. They look to see if you have tumors or if there's blood leaking in your brain, essentially, and that doesn't help us with the neurology. You know, that helps if you need immediate life-saving surgery, but this MRI will do that as well. In addition to that, it shows us the literal connections within the brain that make you function, that make you tick. Every part of the brain has a different process that is applied to a different body function or thought process or emotion. Now, if you have a concussion like in football, a regular MRI is not really going to help with that. But with this MRI, if you have a concussion from that or perhaps a car accident, guess what? You're going to see changes in this MRI that are going to be real, tangible results showing us exactly what part of the brain is not working the way that it should, that makes you not who you really should be. Does that make sense? So it's a technology that, by the way, we have been able to use in scientific research of chiropractic, and it's been wonderful. Already they're producing research that shows that when you get specific adjustments to the spine where you need them, when you need them, they're seeing the brain function where there was less function than normal or dysfunction improve. So they're seeing literal improvements in brain function from a spinal adjustment. That's huge. In one case, they saw over 50% improvement in the frontal region of the brain. In another study, they basically took people who had lots of different issues and diagnoses and they separated them out. And I want you to see this, because what they did in this particular study was they said, we want to see what physical therapy does to brain function with these same types of cases. And in the other section, we're going to have the same types of cases going through specific chiropractic care. Here are the results. There were no improvements in brain function with manipulation through physical therapy. It didn't change a single thing in brain function. Not to say that physical therapy is not helpful, but it's not meant for neurology. It's meant for muscles to get stronger and heal. We're not necessarily in that game here. We're more importantly focused on the health of your spine and nerve system. So when you look at this list, I want you to just take a second, pause, and read some of the things that are on here. Because the reality is that most of the people that have something on this list that, by the way, improved in their brain function and results are taking some form of medication, right? And I'm not saying that chiropractic fixes everything. What I'm trying to tell you is if one of these conditions, like on this list, perhaps it's somebody you know today has, is related to spinal dysfunction from subluxation, how would it change their life if they got a specific adjustment that corrected that and they were able to get off of that medication? I think you'd agree it would change their life exponentially, right? Because medications all have a what? Every medication, including aspirin, has a side effect. And not long ago, I had a nurse practitioner that came in as a patient and said, I had a patient come to me that's on 32 medications. 32 medications. Does everybody start out with 32 medications? Of course not. But we have one, and that usually has a side effect, which then at some point potentially requires what? Another medication to take care of that side effect. And this medication has a side effect, which will eventually, do you get the point? So the pure intent that we have here is not to be your medical doctor and tell you which drugs you should take or shouldn't take. That's not what we do. What we want for you more than anything is for you to be vibrant and healthy and for your body to do what it was originally designed to do without the need for medications or surgery. Now, in the care in our office, there are phases of care that you need to understand that you're going to be going through. The first phase that people go through when they enter our office because they have an injury or an illness related to subluxation is acute care. Okay, acute care simply means when we break it all down, you essentially have around 4 weeks of work that's going to be done or less in an attempt to reduce whatever symptom you have as much as possible. That's the focus. We want to improve the quality of your life for whatever symptom you've walked in here for. Now, not everybody walks in here with symptoms. A lot of people, believe it or not, come in because they're here because they're well and they want to stay well. But in those cases, that's what acute care is for. Lasts about 4 weeks, and generally at the end of that, which is about 12 visits, by the way, we're going to do a re-exam on you to see how much improvement you've made so that you can make an informed decision on where you want to go from there. Now, I think it's logical to say that not everybody is going to respond in the same amount of time, and not everybody has the same problem. Some small problems, some big problems. So 4 weeks essentially is not going to take care of every person that walks in the door. Many people want more, and they want more improvement particularly. So with that, we see this picture. What do you see in this image? What's happening? I think you can see that there's a process that's happening with the dominoes, right? And this person is simply stopping the process. They're stopping the process so that it doesn't continue to spread. What I want you to understand is that when you have vertebral subluxation, you have a situation that is a process, okay? Process meaning, as long as it's there, it continues to get worse. I had a patient who came in a year and a half ago, and she had a condition of the spine called spondylolisthesis in her lumbar low back. And after I went through everything that I've gone through with you here today, she made her own choice that she couldn't do anything at that particular time in her life. So a year and a half later, she walks in the door. We re-x-ray her because at that point it had progressed and it had gotten much worse. So when we compared the new x-ray to her old x-ray, we found that her spondylolisthesis had literally progressed from what we call a phase 1 to a phase 4, or stage 1, stage 4, grade 1, grade 4, however you want to look at it. The point is it went from a condition that, had she said yes the first time, we could have contained and controlled most likely, and the rest of her life she could have lived a very happy, pleasant life without any limitations. But at grade 4, that requires immediate back surgery, which we had to send her out for. And that's very sad to me because it all could have been prevented. So the conditions progress. Now, after we go through this stability care that we've been talking about up to this point, the next phase is correction. And that's where we're going to go back and try to pick up any of the dominoes that we're still able to pick up to revive and revitalize what you have within you. So think of corrective care much like dental or orthodontics, right? When you go to an orthodontist, you have crooked teeth that you want to straighten out. And not everybody's teeth are the same, right? Some have really bad teeth, some not so bad. But they all have one goal, and that is that they want better teeth. Just like chiropractic in our office. Some come in with small problems and curves in the spine. Some come in with massive scoliosis, okay? Different problems, all hoping to have one end goal, improved spinal function. Now, the first thing I want you to understand is that if I were to walk into the orthodontist and say, you know what, you just put these braces on yesterday, thank you by the way, I'm going to be back in 30 days and I want you to take these braces off, and I want my teeth to be straight. Is that a realistic explanation, a realistic expectation rather, of time? Of course not. You're going to get laughed out of the office, right? So we have to have a realistic expectation of time. Your condition will require a certain amount of time to improve. Now, there are certain things within my abilities and within yours that will influence this time. And we'll go over that when we go over your actual schedule. But I want you to know, if you don't follow those rules and you don't show up for your appointments and you don't spend the time that it takes to correct it, it either is not going to happen or it's going to be far longer than you anticipated. But we have to be realistic about that, right? So the next thing is, are braces comfortable? Of course not. There's going to be things you're going to do in this office that aren't always going to be comfortable, but they're necessary to reach the end goal. Does that make sense? When braces come off, for almost everybody that has braces, what do they have to wear? A retainer, right? And I've had dentists as patients here, and they all confirm that if you don't wear the retainer and you're supposed to, what happens? The teeth move back to where they were. Likewise with chiropractic. Whether you've gone through with orthodontics 1 year of braces or 7 years, when they come off, when you go through chiropractic, whether it's months or even years of chiropractic to straighten out your problem, you have to do retainer care. Okay? If you don't, then most likely your spine is going to move back exactly where it was. And I want to show you an example of that. Before I do, I just want to impart upon you this idea of retainer care, which is the next important principle for you. If, number one, you can't foresee that you have the time that it's going to require to correct your condition, then corrective care is probably not for you. Number two, if you can't endure some of the discomforts associated with it, then corrective care is probably not going to be right for you. Number three, if you can't have the foresight enough to see that when you're done with correcting it, you're going to have to do some things to maintain it in the retainer care, then corrective care is probably not going to be the right choice for you. And I just want to be clear, because I want this choice to be right, not for me, for you. For you. Number four, if you're not willing to do some stretches and some exercises from the beginning all the way into your retainer care, then corrective care is probably not going to be the right choice for you. So I'm not going to try to turn you into some big muscled up Hulk. I just want to take the muscles you have around your spine and strengthen them to the point that they can actually hold it in place. And this is where our physical therapy program does really well. When we move the bone, we want to strengthen the muscle around it in that order. We don't want to strengthen the muscle around a misaligned bone or a subluxated bone. Then we're just putting glue around a bad condition. We want to correct the spinal condition first, strengthen the muscle around it, and make it so that it lasts for a very long time for you. Here's an example of a patient that went through correction. You can see in one image where it's very twisted, and you can see where he went through all those phases of care minus the retainer. So in other words, he went through acute care, he went through the other phases through to correction, at which point in time he fell off the wagon, okay? He stopped, he didn't come in for the retainer care, and literally in less than a year's time, probably, he came back in and his spine looked just like it did when we started, okay? Now, why is that important? Was that a waste of his time and money? Absolutely. And that's what I don't want for you. That's why I want to make it perfectly clear what I expect from you if this is what you're going to do. Here's a case where I had an Amish lady that came in, and this one to me is so important. It's an older x-ray that I still use today, because at 32 she didn't come to me because she had scoliosis and was walking completely crooked. She came to me because in her lumbar spine, those very delicate nerves that come out of the spine go to organs like the intestines and bowels, the bladder, and the reproductive organs. And for her at 32, is this normal that she would go 2 weeks regularly without bowel movements? No. Is it normal that at 32 she was having bladder leakage? No. Is it normal that at 32 she hadn't had a menstrual cycle in over a year? Absolutely not. So we began adjusting her, and within 1 month's time, she started having daily bowel movements, no bladder leakage, and she actually had a menstrual cycle. Now, chiropractors don't fix that, okay? We open up the channel by adjusting the vertebral subluxation to reduce the nerve pressure so that communication can then reconnect from that brain through the spine and the nerves to those organs. When communication opens up where there was problems with communication before, things can become repaired. The body knows how those organs work. It knows how fast they should go, how slow they should go. It knows how to repair the damage that's already in place, so long as it's not completely destroyed. We have an amazing healing power within us. In 3 months' time, this was her follow-up x-ray. We had corrected her spine, but the thing is, she drove 2.5 hours one way in a horse and buggy, which equates to 5 hours a day, 3 days a week, for 3 months that she came to see me. That's a lot of time, right? So I chose to find someone closer to her that would handle the retainer care, and they did. And so a year later, I checked on her out of curiosity, and I found that her spine literally went back completely to where it was. It was heartbreaking. And the problem was that chiropractor didn't believe in the retainer care as he explained to me on the phone that he did. That chiropractor told her not to waste her time with exercises, they wouldn't help. That chiropractor told her that he didn't need for her to schedule appointments with him because that's not how he did things. He told her to just come to his office when she hurt. So guess what? All that change and improvement in her life, gone in a year's time. Here we got a case of severe degenerative joint disease in the spine, in a case where it had been there so long, the progress had gone on so far. There were certain things in the spine that even though we were able to straighten the spine and improve nerve function, there was certain damage to the spine, the degenerative joint disease, that just is there for the rest of this person's life. So we don't want to wait too long. Okay, so we're going to be going over x-rays with you personally. You're going to have a file with x-rays, and we're going to show you literally what's happening inside of you between your nerve tests and your x-rays. So I want you to expect that on the next visit when we see you, okay? So you've looked at some of these other x-rays. I know you want to look at yours, and I'm excited to go over that with you. But before we schedule that appointment, before we actually sit down together, I want to tell you a few more things that are very important to me. And here it is. The first thing is, this was a 3-year-old girl that had had severe breathing issues from birth. And she spent her entire life of 3 years in hospitals, doctors' offices, taking tons of medication because her lungs wouldn't work. Eventually, at some point, her grandparents brought her to my office, and we examined her, and the x-ray that you see with the head bent forward like this is horrendous. It's totally abnormal. The x-ray where her head is back and she's got this nice banana-shaped curve bending backwards, that's normal. Now I want you to understand, it took me 2 months to get her to this physician, but at that 2-month mark, which is very important to remember, she was a healthy girl. She was a normal girl. She didn't need medicines, and she didn't have to go to the doctors anymore. She was the way she was meant to be, and that's beautiful. Now, I tell you this story mainly for the little girl, but also because I can relate to that. When I was a kid, I was sick all the time. In fact, I remember being in the hospital just like she was at 3. Guess what? For the same problems. But no one ever told my parents when I was 3, laying in that hospital bed, I remember Santa Claus coming to visit me in Christmas. No one ever told my parents, hey, instead of all these shots and everything else they're putting into your kid, why don't you go see a chiropractor? So I never had the opportunity to see a chiropractor until someone was brave enough to mention it to me in my 20s. I lived an entire childhood and early adult life taking lots of medications that I wouldn't have had to take had I known what I know today. I'd have been a different person. And I'm thankful for what happened to me, because the reality is, for me, like this little girl, I can tell you, much like this picture, when you can't breathe, you're not concerned about what's happening the next hour, tomorrow, or even next week. You could care less about your mortgage as a person, or your responsibilities, or what other people think of you. You have one thought on your mind, just like this actor who's underwater, chained and bound up, and that is, I need one more breath. When I got my first adjustment, when I got up off the table, I felt amazing. Literally, imagine cutting the ropes and the chains and everything off of this person. In the movies, when they come above the water, what do? They go, right? That's what I did after my first adjustment. It was the first time, and I didn't think about it. It just happened. My body took over, and it took the deepest breath I probably had ever taken in my entire life. I had already finished college and had plans on going into a PhD in other areas of health. I didn't even know what chiropractic was. But when this happened to me, guess what? Life changer. I wanted to go to chiropractic school. I wanted to learn how this helped me. I wanted to know how it worked so that I could help people like you. This is a law that I want you to take a second and read because it guides chiropractic today. And this law is what dictates how your insurance works with you and me. This law is what sets the precedent that we basically have 4 weeks to work with you. And had I followed this law with that little girl, she would have never made it to the 2-month mark, and she would have never gotten well. So I want for you what you need, not what some person sitting in a desk working for your insurance company thinks you need, that's never met you, never even looked at your paperwork, by the way, doesn't know what you're dealing with. I want for you what you truly need, nothing less, nothing more. So we don't use insurance to dictate what kind of care we're going to do for you. Last story I have for you. I broke my leg not long ago, and I went to the hospital, and I don't have insurance, and I was happy with the experience because after everything was said and done, I was given an option of making payments for my care that I had and needed, or I was given an option of making a one-time payment that very moment with a substantial discount. And I was so thankful for that. What I want you to understand before you meet with my insurance staff is that whatever your insurance is, it is. But if you need the care here, I'm going to do everything within my power to make sure that you and your family get the care you need and want. We have payment programs. We've gone above and beyond to make sure that it's affordable for you. So thank you for spending this time with me. We've still got a lot to talk about on your next visit. I look forward to it. We love and appreciate you. We'll see you on your next visit. Have a great day.